Hello and welcome back to this video on cost tracking and optimizing the cloud. Well, after all the work that we've done with infrastructure as code, all the stuff that we've automated, it's just so easy to lose track of the spend, right? I mean, you start provisioning stuff and you start creating machines as you need it. You start trashing them when you don't need them. Uh, but where is the sense of being able to have a spot check to see whether the resources that you're creating are being consumed or whether there is scope for optimization? Now, traditionally, there hasn't been any tools available within Azure that would just do an advisory check on the resource consumption behavior in your Azure subscription and give you feedback. Well, there is now, and it's called Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor does exactly what it says on the tin. It looks at the usage and the assets and the resources that you've created within your subscription and gives you recommendation and advice not only on optimizing the spend, but from a security point of view, from a high availability point of view, from a network point of view. So we'll look at one aspect of what it offers, and then we'll also look at Azure Automation once again. There is a pretty neat feature in there, which is introduced through Operations Management Suite. It's also called OMS, that allows you to set up a job that can run across your Azure subscription and help you track virtual machine shutdown and start. So we'll look at that as well. And then that's really it. Let's talk about Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor has four elements to it. The first is availability, security, performance, and cost. So let me flip into the Azure portal very quickly. As you can see here, I'm in the Azure portal. If I go into more services and I search for Advisor, I get this blade here. And within the Advisor, I can select the subscription. I can seek advice on a specific resource group. And the benefit here is, if you're using a subscription for too much, then the advice can be confusing, right? Because if you're using that subscription for dev and test as well as production, then the recommendations you're getting for performance, you might not be interested to apply those recommendations in dev and test, but maybe they're relevant for production. So selecting the resource group kind of narrows down the advisory on the resources that are quite limited to that resource group. But we'll just now run the engine for the entire subscription because we don't have too much going on this subscription. So it does take a few minutes to complete, but it starts to give you results right away. It's showing up here a roll-up of all the recommendations. For example, you can see that there are two recommendations on high availability. There's one element on security as well. So if I click on security, it's saying improve the security of Azure resources, and there are four recommendations here. So let's look at these. Well, this one's quite severe. Enable advanced security for subscription. I'm presuming that I don't have two-factor set up and I don't have encryption set up on my storage account, which if I was storing production category data or maybe highly classified, highly secure classification data, then that would not be a good thing. But yeah, I mean, some of the recommendations that you get, again, you can assess whether they're relevant to the workloads that you're running. And the advisor becomes smarter as you kind of take the recommendations and react to them. Look at high availability. It's telling you that the nodes are not set up for fault tolerance. Again, these are dev test workloads, so I'm not really interested in load balancing or making them fault tolerant. But if this was a production setup, then that would be a recommendation I can use right off the bat. Surprisingly, there are no recommendations on performance and cost. Specifically on cost, there aren't, because this is a paid subscription I'm using, and I'm very diligently switching off all the virtual machines at the end of the training and at the end of the day. So no recommendations on that front. But if this was an enterprise subscription where workloads were not probably being killed or switched off, then I would expect to see some cost recommendations here as well. All right, so that was a quick walkthrough of the advisor recommendations. I'm going to quickly drop back into the slides and show you the Azure Automation Start Stop VM functionality here. What it does is it leverages the the scaled platform that Azure Automation is, and some of the insights that the operation management suite already gathers by looking at the virtual machines that are running in your subscription. And it's able to just hook up to the machines and offer you a capability where it can switch them off and switch them on. But if you have too many virtual machines, you're not going to go into each virtual machine and check in the log whether it was switched off or switched on, or whether the switch off failed because of a certain reason. So what this functionality does is it kind of rolls that data up into a single tile. Right from within one tile, you can see the activity across the estate and then drill in into the specifics. And if there are failures, you can get to the logs, but at least you start at a very high level. So let's look at that. To set this up, I'm going to go back into the Azure portal, and I'm going to go into the accounts that I created, the automation account. You see I've got a few options there. Now, in order to enable OMS, so we'll add the account. In this case, we're adding a new Azure Automation account. Let's specify a name. Since we're creating this for OMS, let's just have that reflected in the name. So call it IAC demo OMS demo 03. We'll put it in the same subscription. Let's create a new resource group. And let's select the location as is. So click create. All right, so the account's created. If I refresh, I am able to try refreshing it again. Now I'm able to see the IAC OMS Demo 03 account. It's provisioned, it's there. The next thing we're going to do is go and enable this automation solution that will basically switch off machines across the estate. In order to do that, I need to come up here and click the green icon. Scroll down to the Intelligence and Analytics section, click on See All, and search for virtual machine. Scroll down, look for, there we go, Start Stop VMs during off hours. So click on that and click on Create. At this point, it gives you an option to create an OMS workspace. Now, OMS workspace is effectively working area for operations management suite. Not only does it use that space to do the connections, but it also gathers the logs from the nodes that it's applying the automation on. Now, the benefit here is if you connect all your nodes up to a single OMS workspace and the logs are gathered, then you can perform log analytics on top of it. So, you can just launch the browser in the OMS workspace and start searching for keywords. Behind the scenes, it's gathering the data, it's finding correlations in the data. While the integration between OMS and Azure Automation in this very example is very limited, but it does open up to new possibilities for using OMS for the other features that it offers. And if you've used System Center in the past, then you're going to find a lot of familiarity with the OMS solution. So I'm going to click on Create a New Workspace. And let's call this workspace IAC Demo OMS 03, or maybe IAC OMS Demo 03. That's better, yeah. And you just need to be careful to put it in the same resource group as to where we provisioned the Azure Automation account. So we provisioned the Azure Automation account in IAC OMS Demo 03 resource group. So let's put it in here. Select the location as West Europe. I'm going to change the, I'm going to keep the pricing tier as per node. Click OK. Click OK here. All right, so the validation successful. We now get the option to select the automation account. Before selecting the automation account, I'm going to make one change to that automation account. When I provision that automation account, I provisioned it as a free account. And since I've selected OMS to be a paid account, they're not going to work together. So I'm just going to open up the Azure Automation account and change the pricing tier from free to basic. And the reason I'm doing that is because in my subscription, I've exhausted the free minutes, as we've been doing a lot of demos with PowerShell runbooks. But hey, if you just wanted to try it out, it's free to try out until you burn out the free 500 minutes that you get per month. So let's browse back to the Azure portal and then select automation accounts. Look for IAC OMS Demo 03. Scroll down to the section where you have pricing tier and usage. Click on free, change it from free to basic, click OK, and now we've upgraded it. So with that done, let's come back to the Add Solution screen, select IAC OMS Demo 03, and we just need to configure a few parameters. So the section here, the target group name, gives you the ability to apply this automation to either one resource group or multiple resource groups. Now, since I've selected the option star, this applies across the estate to all the resource groups. Now, if you were doing this in an enterprise, you wouldn't select star. You would probably call out some of the resource groups. Because in my enterprise, in my subscription, I'm only running dev test workloads. I want this to run across the estate. The next option you have is the VM exclude list. Now, if there's certain VMs within the resource groups that you don't want this to apply to, the switch off and switch on, then you can list them here, comma separate them, and in that case, they'll be excluded from this exercise. Now, you have to set up a schedule. Now, while the automation solution says switch off, switch on, and off peak, you define what the off peak is for your organization. So in this, as you can see on the screen, the schedule is currently set to afternoon. So I'm going to change that to 08 o'clock a.m. and in the evening, switch off at 07 p.m. And that's why it makes more sense to set it up at the resource group level, because depending on the workloads that you run in work groups, in resource groups, your preference on schedules would be different. So click OK. It's just going to do a round of validation. And if I click Create, it's going to start provisioning the OMS workspace and integrate it with the Azure Automation account behind the scenes. The first step really is to validate that the parameters that we've specified here are valid or not. So it's just going to work its way through behind the scenes. And by the looks of it, it's completed. That was quick. So let's now click on the automation account and come into the IAC OMS Demo 03. As you can see here, not much has changed, but the integration has been successful. It usually takes a few hours to kind of sync everything up, and because I've selected all the resource groups to be applied, it will take a little bit longer to accomplish the background integration. But if I scroll down, I should now see that the solution section is enabled. Previously, it was grayed out. So the new OMS workspace we created, that's now linked up here. So if I click the unlink option, I basically will detach the OMS, the operations management workspace that I've created from my Azure Automation account. So we're going to click Solutions, and it's still onboarding the solution, so it doesn't reflect here. But if we give it 5-10 minutes and come back to it, and just click on the solution page again, we will see that the solution of switching off and switching on Azure VMs would start to show up here. So we'll pause and come back and see when it's available in a few minutes. So if I click refresh here, you would see that the asset count has gone up from 20 odd that it was to 41 now. That just means it's created more variables to record the name of the assets that it needs to work on in the background. And it might fail for some of them because some of the resource groups I have within my subscription are kind of stale, but it would generally succeed for most of them. So coming back to the Azure Automation account now, if I scroll down to the section where I have the option for related resources and click on solutions now, I do see the start stop VM solution imported here. And if you click on it, it takes you right into the OMS workspace that's associated to it. And as you can see here, you've got some options here to, pick and choose the virtual machines where you want to connect the OMS solution with the virtual machine so that you can get the log analytics piece going, capture some of the other insights, like performance, usage from within the virtual machines. It's capable of also connecting with storage accounts. And I think that's quite useful because if you're using blob store or a table storage there, then it's useful to get log files and analytics from there as well. As you can see here, it says the solution resources. There are 4 solution resources: start, stop VM, start by resource group, and there are a couple other in there. But in summary here, um, uh, it's performing an assessment of the estate at the moment, and the first time around, it takes a couple of hours to complete. But once the assessment's completed and the clock hits 7 p.m., it will run the job and record the output of the switching off and switching on, and then roll that up at the summary tile here. But we're not going to wait for 4 hours to figure out whether it worked or not. But you get the gist of where and how you need to enable it and where you need to see the results. So with that, we've kind of covered a couple of key things in this video. We've talked about Azure Advisor, which I think is just the beginning of something great, where it can learn from the resources that you're creating within the subscription, give you recommendations which are just not compute related, but network security, high availability related. So you don't need consultants like me to come in and tell you that your setup isn't high availability. Azure Advisor can well do it for you. Um, the other thing we looked at is the automation solutions that are available and the extensions to it. So if you think about it, the start stop VM automation task which we picked up from the marketplace is really an extension to the automation account, and also bridges the gap between automation account and OMS, where traditionally they both worked in isolation, but now it provides a bridge between the two. The other thing that I want to call out is that there is now a new billing API available for Azure, and if you Google it or search for it on Bing, and let's just run a quick search here, Azure billing API. There we go. There's a very nice blog post on it. Now, this blog post also walks you through some of the steps that you can take to set up a continuous extract. Sorry, that's the technical documentation. Let's look at this one here. Okay, it still isn't the right one, so just bear with me for 1 second while I search for it. There we go. Announcing the release of Azure Usage and Billing Portal. So there you go. So this is an API that has been released, and when APIs are released, open source creates something beautiful, and this is just a great example of that, where a Power BI solution pack has been created, which uses the API along with the extract functionality to pull out the consumption and the spend, and show it on a Power BI dashboard with very fine presentation on visualization. As you can see on the screen here, not only can you track the resources and filter through, but you've got visuals on the trends of usage, times, patterns, times of day. You can even pivot that on a map here to see where the most consumption is happening. Again, this is an open source solution, and you can navigate to the GitHub repo here, which has got details on how you can set this up against your Azure subscription. So I can't emphasize enough why it's important to create APIs in a product, because good APIs and good documentation usually leads to great open source solutions. So that's really a roundup of cost tracking and optimization. I hope you enjoyed this video and can put some of this to work in your Azure subscription to save some compute and maybe some cost.